Module 3c, delivering services for youth who have been sex trafficked or commercially sexually exploited or are at risk to be. Now we are going to switch gears to talk about two major safety issues specialized residential placement settings may face: recruitment and running away. Under state certification requirements, these issues must be addressed in the safety standard of your service delivery plan.
Dana Dorn, Milwaukee Academy. Mary Cowan Bantle, Lifehouse.
Grooming and recruitment in residential is something that needs to always be at the forefront of our minds. Our girls are coming in at the academy, where they're coming in from larger cities. And we also are having some young folks come in from out of more northern parts of Wisconsin and what have you. And what we found is the grooming and recruitment don't look any different. I think some folks want to look for, we need to be careful bringing a girl to the city. She's going to, maybe get recruited by somebody. And I think the most important thing to really keep your eye on is when you have young folks, whether they're at risk for trafficking or they've been trafficked, is that the grooming and recruitment is a part of what they are used to. They themselves have been groomed and recruited in there, and that's been a very normal part of the process of them becoming part of the life. What it can look like in a residential setting is maybe there are two girls that are sitting really close together all the time. They want to eat together. They want to do this together. And while that in and of itself is not a problem, it all depends on if that takes over every other aspect of interacting with someone. So kind of looking out for the peerships that happen, as our girls call them, the connections that the girls are making. Are they writing, note passing? That's something really important to look at. I would say if you have a really odd coupling of two girls, you really need to kind of understand what process those two girls are going to become really close. It almost looks like a real best friendship is starting. There isn't a lot of force. There isn't a lot of coercion in that. It's really just girls sitting down and chatting with each other. And you need to look out for some of the glamorization of the life and the glorifying of things. Another piece that we look for is what we call servitude. Girls that are asking someone to carry something all the time. Can you throw my stuff away? Can you do this? It's something that if it's happening right away in the beginning, there might be a little bit more involved versus this girl's just trying to be really nice and be my friend. So we just kind of got to look at any kind of the intense building of a relationship, because it usually starts from some kind of friendship.
I think before someone has a really solid understanding of what commercial sexual exploitation or sex trafficking often looks like, it can feel really confusing why someone might engage in grooming or recruitment if they've been the victim of that crime themselves. But I think as we understand that dynamic and start working with young people who've had that experience, it becomes a little more clear. So why might someone groom or recruit another youth? I think that oftentimes this is a part of what is expected of young people who have been in the life. So it is a learned behavior, and that there can be pressure from a trafficker, even if they are not there in that moment, they are not in your program. It could be something that they said before. It can be that constant vigilance of when I get out of here, when he finds me, what are they going to say? I need to be doing what I need to be safe the next time I see that person. And part of that is about recruiting. I think something else that can happen is that two young people build a bond, and we know that running is a common coping mechanism for trafficked youth, sometimes returning to a trafficker or sometimes just to escape the place that they are. And so we know that if a young person feels fearful about running, they might recruit another young person from the program to run with them. And if they run, where are they likely to end up if they've been in the life is back connected to a trafficker. So it feels confusing. It feels like, why would they do that to someone else if they've had that experience themselves? But it's really a part of the culture, and it's something that we need to anticipate is likely to happen, and to be able to really be mindful of and watching for when we're working with this population in a residential setting. When we think about preventing potential grooming in our program, we need to know that we might not be able to prevent it all, but being proactive, being mindful, so being really aware of what that behavior might look like, and also being really honest and upfront with youth from the beginning about what grooming and recruiting is, and letting them know that it's not something that that they can do in this program, right? So that's part of our program expectations. It's in our youth handbook. We know that youth get a packet and a handbook. They're not going to sit down and read it all. So sometime during that intake process, a staff will go through and talk through what all of our program expectations are. And one of them has to do specifically with recruitment. And so we ask youth, do you know what this means? And sometimes youth will say yes, sometimes youth will say no. Whatever they respond, I'll say, but I really want you to know what this means here, right? And so recruiting someone is really just getting them to join you and doing something, right? So someone could be recruited to join a football team or recruited to join a branch of the military. Those are ways that we use that word. But another way to use that word is to get something to do something with you that is unsafe. Right? And so that could include selling drugs or selling your body. And really, that's the kind of recruitment we're talking about here. And I am letting you know this because if this were ever to happen to you, if someone were to approach you, I want you to know that you can come and talk to a staff member, that we want to understand this is happening and we want to support you. And I think that really being upfront about that expectation from the beginning and really spelling out what that means lets youth know that we're paying attention and we're watching for it, and really making it about safety in the program, right? And as we've talked about before, safety might look and feel different to young people who are new to being in a program like this, but kind of talking about it from the beginning. I also think ongoing dialogue is really important, and using prevention curriculums like Not a Number, a place where not necessarily to say, this is what I see happening right here, but giving an entire group language to talk about this is what recruitment can look like. This is what an unhealthy or healthy relationship can look like. This is what a red flag means. When we see a red flag, it doesn't mean something bad is going to happen, but it means that we need to really be paying attention. And if we're creating opportunities to kind of teach our youth and have groups that talk about those kinds of experiences, then as they start to bubble up, it's easier to have an honest conversation with young people at the program about what we're seeing or how to move forward.
When considering some of the precautions to put in place for kids who are active recruiters, but you still feel like you can provide some treatment and safety for them, what we often do is take into consideration where bedrooms are located. Would they be better served closer to where the staff offices are? Maybe their room is next door to a person who's a little bit further along in their treatment. So we really look at room placement, unit placement. We then put a little bit higher staff ratio on to make sure that they're there to be able to monitor conversations with girls and really do some intervening and helping the kids understand why we are doing some close supervision. We also, when they do walk in the door, are very clear on how we are with safety, all safety issues, not just in recruitment and building very private relationships amongst each other. So those are some of the safety measures to think about right in the beginning when you bring a young person in that has some recruitment in their history.
When considering a referral for someone who has a known history of recruitment, I think it's really important to take in consideration the makeup of the program at the time and to think about the safety concerns with youth who are currently in the program. But I also think it's really important to be in touch with other folks within our Safe Harbor network. In the state of Minnesota, we're really lucky that we have many programs across the state offering housing to Safe Harbor youth, and also a network of regional navigators. And so sometimes if we don't feel that we can safely meet the needs of a youth who's referred to our program because of safety concerns for youth who are currently in the program, it can be really helpful to reach out to the regional navigator or other Safe Harbor housing providers to see if there's a program that is in a situation that's better able to meet that youth's need.
Well, we have to be fairly aware and understand the reasons girls will recruit other girls into the life or to run or to be with them. One of the pieces we also have to be aware of is that our young people can also recruit and groom staff. We have to have a fairly open conversation and training with staff to understand those pieces. And our girls will really work hard to find the staff that might be considered the weakest link in the sense of maybe they're very brand new, don't have some tenure in this field, might be very, soft-hearted and really feel for the girls. And sometimes the girls will use those moments to create friendships or create these kinds of relationships that will ultimately result in, hopefully, them maybe a staff will let them make an extra phone call or call their boyfriend, or it's something to get their needs met. So we have to be aware of that piece of grooming and recruitment as well, is they may not be recruiting the staff into the life, but they're going to groom them into allowing them access to the life. So that's another aspect to think about when we talk about grooming and recruitment. One of the biggest areas that agencies have, especially us when we do admissions here at Milwaukee Academy, is really fine-tooth comb through referrals to really note if there's any language or experiences that girls have at grooming and recruiting. And whether it's other adults to open the door to the life or girls to go on the run with, what have you. We have denied a few young people for very heavy recruiting, especially if we have very new and vulnerable kids on the units that they would be residing on. But that isn't an automatic. If we have a good, solid milieu and we have kids that are not brand new and into their treatment, we can take some of the young ladies that have some recruiting, and then we put some special supervision and precautions in place.
So we are aware that when working with commercially sexually exploited youth, that running is a very typical coping mechanism. So in our housing programs, we're never going to discharge a youth for running behavior alone, and we want to make sure that we have an appropriate response. And I think, that first question of why would a youth run? Why would that be a coping mechanism? That young people are often either running away from something challenging or running towards something. And so to think about what some of those things might be. So when youth might be running away, this might be the first time this young person has been able to land and really start to process some of the difficult things that have happened to them. And that might feel incredibly challenging, hard and scary. And it might tempt youth to run. And for young people who've consistently lived in dangerous situations, either with a trafficker, in a dangerous home situation, that leaving has been a way for them to maintain their own safety. So when something challenging happens, they get in an argument with a staff member, another resident, something challenging happens at school and they know they're going to have to talk about it with the staff when they get home. Little things like that might not be a true risk to their safety, might feel that way to them because they start to feel that fear and anxiety. That gets tripped, and where do they go? They go to the habit that has served them well to keep them safe, which is to run. So we know that sometimes youth are running from our program, but there are other times that youth are running to something else. And I think when we're thinking of sex trafficked youth in particular, that can be running to return to a sex trafficker. And that could be because we know that there is trauma bonding that happens. That could be a relationship that they really believe that this person loves and cares about them. It can also be about protecting their own safety. And this can feel counterintuitive. And I'd like to share a story about, within the first year that I was working in my role in a safe harbor housing program, a young person was talking about being in contact with and potentially meeting up with their trafficker, and feeling a lot of fear and anxiety about that. And me my response was to say, that's not something you have to do. You are in such a safe place right now. You are in a place where the doors are always locked. There's cameras always on. If anyone who is not supposed to be here shows up at our front door or anywhere on our property, we call 911 immediately. This is a very safe place for you to be. And her response to me was, I know I'm safe when I'm here, but my mom and my sister aren't safe, and he knows where they live. And so as a safety precaution for her family, she was feeling tempted to reunite with someone who she knew would likely cause her harm if she was with him. So our young people who've been engaged in trafficking are part of very complicated situations where it is not always clear where safety is and where safety isn't. And so recognizing that youth are sometimes going to run towards a situation that looks very dangerous to us, but that could be a threat from a trafficker saying, you know, if you end up in a program and you don't try to return to me when I see you again, this is what's going to happen, or what have you. So I think it's really important to first and foremost to be aware of the dynamics about why youth might run when we're thinking about how we might respond.
So at Milwaukee Academy, we have two different angles that we have built into our program. And one of them was present before I came aboard and before we actually worked with trafficked youth. There are the time delay alarms on all of our outside egresses. It takes about 30 seconds for the doors to open. And one of the things that we learned from all of our young people who have running in their history is that the impulsive decision making or the automatic responses to their triggers, those time delay doors have really helped in the immediacy and the when it's something very impulsive. So that has been very helpful. What that also has allowed is for the girls that maybe do attempt to do that our staff can have conversations and build relationships and try to do some conversations about safety right there on the spot. What our staff are also able to do for the girls who are determined to get out, even with that, and they have their hands on the door, we do a little bit of what we call harm reduction and reminding them you're always welcome back if you make that decision. You have our number, things like that allows the kids to still remember there's a place for them to come back to. So that is something that has already been in place in a tangential and in a practical kind of way. But we really are a relationship-oriented program from the beginning. We really try to build relationships all the time, finding teachable moments, finding support, finding moments in the day where our staff can check in with the kids and just ask them simply how they were doing. Really meeting them where they're at is really what we try to do to build that foundation that will maybe the kids will think twice about wanting to run outside of the building.
When it comes to prevention of youth running, I think first of all, we just need to recognize that runs are going to happen when you're serving this population. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to do everything in our power to keep youth from running, especially when we know that they may end up in some very dangerous situations when they're outside of our program. And I think the key way to intervene with run prevention is really about relationship building. That from the moment youth walk in, we want to be working on building positive relationships with young people so they feel invested in staying. And that's really a core need of a lot of young people who've experienced commercial sexual exploitation, is that they have not had safe adults to build solid relationships with. So starting that, as soon as they walk through the door. And then I also think it's important to talk a little bit about safety planning if a youth is going to run. And so we, of course, do not want to give youth permission to leave our program. Sometimes youth sneak out and we don't have the opportunity to have a conversation with them. But on intake, we'll often ask youth, if that's something that they've done in the past or if that's something they're worried they might do. And sometimes youth will be honest with us that, yeah, that's a concern that they have for themselves. And starting to even think about what are some of the triggers for that. If you were going to run, what are the things that you would need to feel safe? But more important, what can we do to make you feel safe here in the program? But let's say that a youth is planning to leave the program and doesn't sneak out. A staff catches them on their way out and is able to stop and have a conversation. I think starting by just asking, what's happening right now? Can you help me understand? Is there something we can work on together so that you can feel safe and comfortable staying here? And sometimes we've had a lot of success, catching a youth who's feeling that impulsive feeling of wanting to run from a situation and being able to problem solve together a way for them to stay. But when it becomes very clear that a youth is planning to run, we want to make sure that they're going to be safe as possible when they leave and that they know that they are welcome back. So repeating that on intake, we tell youth that if they ever choose to run, that we hope that they return to our program, that that when they're doing that, because so often youth who've run from programs, they know that there's a history of getting in trouble. And so there have been youth who I've told over and over again, if you decide to run, when you leave right now, I want you to know that as soon as you go, you can come back, and we want you to come back. That youth have told me they walked outside the door, heard the door slam, and as soon as it slammed, they knew they wanted to come back, but they felt like they couldn't. That they were already stuck in the momentum of this decision they made. So we want them to hear that loud and clear, and I think part of that is saying it multiple times, having that really be embedded in the program. But also thinking about, do youth have access to phones in your program? Can that youth have a phone when they leave? A phone can be access to danger, but it's also a lifeline to safety. It's a way for them to contact us. We want them to make sure that they have any important hotline numbers, like Day One in the state of Minnesota, or the cell phone that is on a staff member 24/7. We want to make sure they have that information. We want to make sure that we have in our staff office a place where youth can keep money, so that if we have incentives as allowance, and so sometimes youth have cash and they'll decide to keep it in the staff office because it's safer. And so we're not going to offer this right up front, but if it is very clear a youth is leaving, I would rather them be able to pay to get on a bus, for example, than to trade someone for a ride. And so I think that's part of that safety planning for us. And then when a youth returns to the program, it may be 100% appropriate for there to be logical consequences for that youth deciding to leave. But first and foremost, we need to welcome our youth back. They need to know that we are relieved to see them, that our number one concern while they were gone was their safety, that we are safe, kind, consistent adults who worried about them when they were gone. And so we have found that oftentimes youth are in touch with us when they're on run, not always, but sometimes, via text or what have you on our staff cell phone. And so really praising them and thanking them for trusting us to be in touch with us and as a support system. So really, I always, when a youth returns to our program after being on run, the first thing I want them to hear is, we are so glad to see you. Welcome back. What do you need right now? Do you need a shower? Do you need a meal? Do you need a little bit of time by yourself to just settle in? Because we don't know what they just came from. We don't know where they were or what happened. And then from there, we can have conversations about there may be a logical consequence or what have you. But I think it's really critically important to that relationship building that when youth return, we welcome them.
After we have had a chance to welcome our kids back after running, which we very much do. In fact, many times when I see the first time I see them, I give them a hug as well and tell them I'm so happy they are safe. And I think most of our staff do something like that just because the girls that come back are feeling a little guilty. They know they breached some trust. They know that they have damaged some relationships. So I think they're really looking for that validation that the staff still care about them. So after we have them back and they're getting settled in, one piece that seems to have worked really well is to then have the girls all meet together in a group and get an opportunity to talk to their peer and kind of hear what happened. It demystifies it. It takes away some of the glorification sometimes. And it really validates that, yes, we are welcoming you back. We want to hear how you've been, if whatever you want to say to your peers. And we do that when they're very ready, when they've done everything else they can to get reconnected to the program. But that group processing has been very helpful for the milieu to learn how to get back to a new normal with this young person and to start to build some trust that they may have felt they lost with each other.
Apply what you've learned. To help you gain skill using what you've learned, try out your new knowledge on these examples. You will have half a minute to write down your responses to the question. If you need more time, please pause the program while you write your responses. Example 2. Think about Devontae's experiences with grooming. Let's spend a moment thinking about why a youth like Devontae might groom and recruit another youth. What are some reasons this may occur, and what could it look like in your facility? These are some reasons Devontae might do grooming and what it could look like. Grooming may be due to pressure from the trafficker and for Devontae to maintain their own safety. You may notice strong relationships between two particular youth where one seems to be isolating the other from activities and other residents. They may always be together and always choose to partner. One youth may appear to serve the other.
Example 3. Resident Danny has not engaged much in the program and seems distracted. Her behavior is across the spectrum, from being silly and immature to tantruming to physically lashing out. She often says she doesn't want to stay in the program. As you interact with Danny, what are some things you may need to remember about youth coming into the program? Here are some things you might need to remember. Youth may not have the emotional capacity to act their age. It is normal for their emotions and behaviors to vary. It is also normal for youth to not want to be in the facility or engage in programming.
Trauma-responsive services need to be tailored to meet the needs of youth who have been sex trafficked or commercially sexually exploited, and also the needs of youth who are at risk for future sex trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation. Residential program models may vary in terms of how much they mix these populations of youth and how they develop safety and services to meet their needs.
Dana Dorn, Milwaukee Academy.
While all of the girls placed at Milwaukee Academy get the same programming when it comes to our groups and individual and the milieu and school, what we have found over the years is that our girls that are specifically placed with us in our program that addresses trafficking is that those services need to be intensified. The case management, there seems to be a lot more team members involved. Our girls have law enforcement sometimes, they have community advocates, they have a lot of other people that sometimes demand for a little bit more focused case management. So our case managers are allowed to have more intensive, more meetings. We have increased our family therapy with our young people because we have a few more levels of trauma to get through with them. Individual can look very different with our young people at the beginning than at the end. And our crisis management staff. Our staff are more heightened at the beginning when our girls come in because of the high run risk. But we've also learned that as our girls are working really hard on their treatment work and gaining some knowledge and skills, sometimes that can be very scary for them because they've never reached that level of success. And sometimes that can be a trigger for them, or they can start feeling almost survivor's guilt, like, how am I getting this chance to do so well and have this life while my friends are still out there? And sometimes we have another moment in their treatment course that they can be at higher risk for running. So we want to have our staff around to do some more processing as well. So what the difference in our models is much more of an ability to have intensified services all around so that we can do a really good job of some discharge and transition planning as well, so that our girls are not lost in the shuffle once they leave our program. When I think of our staff's response to our girls, whether they are placed with us for trafficking-focused recovery or at risk or for any other trauma-based experiences they've gone through that has influenced them being with us, there's not a lot that I would say staff would need to do differently. They would just maybe need to be more thoughtful and planful with our girls who are more at risk to run. The supervision is going to be a little bit tighter on kids that is a part of their history. Our clinical staff are very, very key in helping our floor staff understand some of the risks they're uncovering during therapy. So it maybe isn't a different response. It might be a little bit more thoughtful response to girls that are at risk for running. One of the things we have all of our girls be a part of here to understand the risks of the life, is all of our girls go through a prevention program called My Life, My Choice. Our staff have been trained to do that. So that covers the understanding and risk no matter where the girls are on the continuum of risk or if they are fully in the life. So all of our girls get that. What is a little bit more intensified for our girls who are here to work on getting out of the life is that they have a group specifically for them, run by a survivor mentor from the Milwaukee area, who she herself was in the life for a long time as a youth and an early adult, and she now does a lot of work in the community. So not only is she there for the girls to give that space for them to really process through their recovery, but she does staff training for our staff. She does ending the game for all of our staff to really delve into understanding. She does some individual support of the staff. She does supervision of the staff for those particular moments. So we really try to have her be a part of the program to give those special, I guess, an understanding that goes a little deeper, being a survivor herself. So that would be a big difference between with the staff and their training on how to work with the different populations in our building.